drive some of you guys crazy and I'll hear about it all. That's all you got out of it. I heard you talk Sunday, your collar was jacked up. All right, man. Sometimes I like to come and talk to you about things I've conquered, and so I can tell you in hindsight, like, this is really good for you to do in your life. And then sometimes I come and I talk to you about things that God is showing me that we need to move toward, and that's good. And so we walk through that together. And then sometimes I come and I share with you something that I struggle with badly. This is one of those days. So when I talk to you today, I'm talking to me today, okay? And so I can get pretty hardcore with myself. So if I get hardcore with you, then that's cool too, right? Yeah. Some of you guys like that stuff. That's kind of, they just own whatever, man. I'm going to start in, where's my Bible at? In Romans. I'm going to start in the book of Romans today. And I think what we're going to talk about, I'll tell you what we're going to talk about. I usually like to keep you in suspense. We build it. But today I'm just going to tell you, man, we're going to talk about patience. It's bad, isn't it? Anybody got that one conquered? Got that licked? Like one person in the whole room, and she's a liar, so she's got other things going on. She got a whole bunch of other stuff. I'll tell you, I have a small issue with patience. Small. I got behind this person. I was coming from the church to town the other day. From the church. I was coming from the church. This is terrible. I shouldn't even say this. Y'all are going to leave and go, man, this place is hopeless. It's like, why even waste my time? I was coming from the church, and I got behind this lady. Highway 64, it's 70 miles an hour out there. Just in case anybody was like, in case anybody wants to know, it's 70 out there. It's not 25. It's not 25, I promise you. I got behind this lady, and I'm sure she was nice, and it may be one of you in here, and if it is, speed up. Just drive faster. It's the pedal on the right. Push it. Miraculous things happen. And I get I'm an aggressive driver, like really aggressive. And some of you guys can relate, right? And Celia was riding with me, and she's not. She's grandma driver. She's like, and so she's constantly over there pushing her brake and just holding on to the dash and whatever else she does. And I confess this to you because I think it's good for the soul confession. But I told Celia, I said, I want to ram her and push her off the road. Like, with everything in me, I wanted to just ram her. Like, it was a little car, I have a big truck, and I wanted to help her down the road. And I thought, there's going to be a police report. And then that's not going to be good for my profession. Or maybe it would. Who knows, man? So I have a little struggle with patience on occasion. So we're going to talk about that today. But I want to start in Romans. And here's what I think about the way life works. I think a lot of us have different ideas what the meaning or purpose or goals of life are. And I think that sometimes in Christianity we try to sell like eternity. We try to sell this idea of getting right with God. Like, your life may be terrible and you may be struggling with all these areas, but that doesn't matter because the main thing is that you say this prayer, right? And that kind of gets pushed around a lot in the Bible Belt. And the Bible Belt's pretty fundamentalist in nature, so there's a lot of that heavy just do this, and then here's all your rules. And we get this real heavy, like rule-driven, churchy thing going where we measure our righteousness by our works, by how good we are, but we say that, but that's not even really true. We measure our righteousness by how bad everybody else is, right? Because our heaven is great for us, but we're not as concerned with our heaven as that everybody else is going to hell. Like people who drive 25. We just want everybody else to get theirs. We're way more concerned with revenge, with people who have wronged me getting theirs than we ever really are about us. Because, hey, let's face it, we're all good. I mean, like, we all got it together. Right? See, I know inside, the little man inside you is going, yeah, that's right. Don't say it out loud because people are looking at you. Like, you can't do that in public. You can't go, you're right, brother, amen. Because then people will go, man, that guy, he thinks he's got it together, and I know I'm better than him. That's what we're all saying inside, right? So we have this idea that of righteousness, and we also have this idea that we can make God love us more or like us more, or we don't even really care about that. I don't think we care about it. I think we can make God work for us more. Like if I do this, then God's gonna perform better for me. Like it's some kind of, I'm convinced that Bible Belt gospel and Christianity is a karma-based religion. It is that the more good things I do, then God will be better to me. And the more bad things I do, God will be mean to me. Right? I mean, don't we kind of see that going on all the time? And so we have this idea of life that if we perform or live or do these certain things or act these certain ways, then we're better Christians or better people, and we're gonna, we're doing what's expected of us. And even in as far as our salvation or our redemption, man, we put a lot of that on this event, this saying of this prayer and this event that will somehow punch my ticket to some other place that after this life is going to be better. And we get this idea that just getting by or struggling through this life will we just got to make it through, and then someday it's going to be the life, a different life. But that's not really what the Bible teaches, really, at all. The Bible teaches that this salvation is a salvation for here. It's an idea of being made whole and complete, like your life is incomplete, and we're trying to figure out what life is and where it comes from and how to live, and all of a sudden we start to realize that, man, I'm not achieving it. Like I can't get there on my own, and so we sometimes we move to this thing or that thing or whatever, and sometimes we join a religion, and it makes us feel better about ourselves because we can perform all of these religious things and do better than our neighbors or do better than everybody else, and that makes us feel better for a little while, but it does leave us empty, kind of like it didn't really work. I've heard so many people say, I tried Christianity, but it didn't really work. And so that tells us that we're trying to do something in our power. And so that's what this writer in Romans, his name's Paul, as he's writing this book, he's adamant about this redemption or this salvation. And this salvation, this word sozo, it means to be made whole or complete or it's like healed is the great word, like we're broken and it fixes us, like we're incomplete and it makes us whole, like we're dead and it makes us alive. And so as he's writing this, he's teaching, and Paul's teaching and his belief, and the teachings and the beliefs throughout the New Testament are that you cannot save yourself. You can't perform to make yourself whole. So life, a lot of us, life is that way. Like everything is about redemption or being made right or righteousness. And then then other people are like, man, I just want the most out of life. I don't want life to pass me by. I don't want to miss any part of it. And so there's this kind of split among what the function and role of religion is, or even if having a fulfilling, or what we would say a successful or a happy or a productive life, we kind of get talked down to if we're striving after that, like somehow we're worldly or materialistic if we want a better life, that we should just get saved and then suffer, right? So there's these two trains of thought. Well, Paul addresses this as he starts here, and in Romans chapter 5, verse 1, it starts with a therefore, and you have to go back and you have to read all that he's talking about, and I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to skip the therefore, and you can just check it out yourself. So he says this: since we have been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. Through him we have obtained access by faith into his grace in which we stand, and we rejoice in hope of the glory of God. What Paul's saying here is he's saying that we have peace with God. We have righteousness or right standing with God. This is so hard for us to realize. I think this is the stumbling block of modern Christianity, is that we do not believe that we have right standing with God. So we spend our lives trying to achieve something that we already have. See, here's the thing. Through Christ Jesus, and that means through Jesus as the Messiah, that's what Christ Jesus means. Through Jesus as Messiah, God has made us right with himself. Deal with it. Deal with it. Get over yourself. You can't make God perform for you. You can't make him love you anymore. You can't make him hate you. You can't make God against you. You are right with God, but not by anything that you have done, because none of us would ever be able to do that. That's always our problem, is we're always trying to make ourselves right with God. God made himself right with you. Period. God made himself right with you. You are righteous in the sight of God. When God looks upon us and looks upon our lives, he sees nothing but the Messiah. This was the whole point of the cross. Do you not get that? Jesus went to the cross. He was dead. He died. He shed his blood. He laid down the sacrifice. And then he was resurrected, overcoming death, hell, and the grave, and redeeming mankind to God. See, we forget we don't understand what the cross is actually about. The cross of Jesus makes mankind right with God. We have right standing with God. But I don't want you to get confused about this, because many people who have been made right with God will never see the kingdom of heaven. We will never share in the experience of the fullness of the life God has for us. And to me, that is what the meaning and purpose of life is all about. The meaning and purpose of life is not about making yourself right with God. We got to get that that's done for us. The meaning and purpose of life is found in living out and existing and seeking God in his kingdom. Jesus said like this: if we will seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, if we seek that kind of life out, that all the rest of life, food and shelter and clothing and the needs and the necessities of life and love and peace and joy and goodness and faithfulness and all of these things will be given to us. It's all part of what happens to us as we seek his kingdom. as we seek His kingdom, not as we seek right standing with Him, because if we're seeking right standing with God, we're looking for something that's already done. And it doesn't matter what you think about your right standing with God. You can disagree with me. God is still not going to make you not right with Him. You can go, no, I'm not right with God. And I'll say, you're right with God. And you'll say, no, I'm not. And I can say, all right, but that doesn't change it. And so what do? We keep working harder, trying harder, performing more, and we find it to be very frustrating and very tiring. But there is a way to find and seek the kingdom of heaven and to live the life that God really, really wants for us. And so as Paul's writing this, he says, through Him we have obtained access by faith into His grace. Now, grace is a good thing for me. It's a good thing for you too, whether you know it or not. Because here's what grace is. Grace is God's power, God's supernatural power doing in me and for me what I am unable to do for myself. Isn't that awesome? Like, I don't have it in me to be patient. It's just not there. But God is doing a work in me. It's His grace, His power, His supernatural power in me that is able to do more than I could ever do. Okay? So to me, the secret and the key to experiencing life is to learn to work with the grace of God as He begins to mold us and shape us and make our lives into what He has planned for us. And God's plan for us is good. God's plan for you is good. God's plan for me is good. But here's the problem I have. I don't believe it. I don't always believe it. I get lost. I get lost in my circumstances. I get lost in situations. I get lost when bad things happen to people I love. I get lost whenever it doesn't feel like I think it should feel. There's deserts and there's dry times. And there's times where I can't see God or hear from God. And there's times where I struggle with depression and I struggle with anger and I struggle with rage and I struggle with road rage and I struggle with patience and I struggle with all these things. And I'm thinking, if God is truly for me, then I should not struggle. But is that true? Is that true? I forget these things. And so when I come up and talk to you, God reminds me of these things, like I have never grown in good times. This crazy thing about me is when everything's good, I rarely change much. Just kind of slough along, you know? But there's some kind of slap in the face, like when things aren't going right and I don't feel right. And it's those times when I come and I read and I'm like, oh God, man, what's going on here? I don't have any faith. Like I've lost my way somehow. So I come back and I recenter and that's the grace of God speaking to me and moving me and recentering me. And it's the hope that Paul's talking about here. It's the hope that draws us and changes us. And Paul says, so we rejoice in the hope of the glory of God. And hope's great, isn't it? Because hope has nothing to do with my current circumstance or situation. Hope is like what's going to be like when I get out of this. You know, 40 years in the desert. 40 years. 400 years in captivity. That's the children of Israel's story. 400 years in captivity. 40 years in the desert, the dry places, battling for your life against the elements, against the enemies, against starvation. Nothing to eat but manna. Flakes, cornflakes. No, Special K with nothing on it. Just tasteless nourishment. And nourishment's no good. We don't want nourishment, man. We want sugar and candy and cake. It's good. Steak. Remember that story, man, where they asked for quail? They were like, we want quail, we want quail. And then there was quail up to their knees. No more quail. Cut off the quail. So, 40 years? Man, I don't like suffering 40 minutes, I'll be honest with you. I'd be no good as a POW. Like, you come in, 5 minutes, we're done. I'll tell you anything you want to know about anything. If I don't know, I'll make it up. I will tell you so much that you won't believe a word I'm saying anyway. I don't like to suffer. I don't think any of us in our culture, in our day and age, we don't like to suffer. But this next part, Paul, he goes into this and he says, more than that, we rejoice in our suffering. Rejoice, to find joy again. In our suffering, Paul, he's a weed smoker. He's got to be like, because this is just not right. It's strange, it's weird, and it doesn't make any sense. But he says this, he says, we rejoice in our suffering, knowing that suffering produces endurance. Endurance. And endurance produces character, and character produces hope, and hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who He's given to us. Suffering produces patience. One of the translations, a lot of the translations will use the word patience or patient endurance. Suffering produces patience, and patience produces character. And character is life. And the reason so many of us aren't achieving life and aren't truly living and aren't truly productive is because we are people of very weak character. We're people who don't stand up for anything. I'm glad that wasn't me, man. It may be. I don't know. Patience. Or suffering produces patience, and patience produces character. I want to look, one second, I want to look at James. Turn over to James. It's just a few, it's a little flip down the Bible. But in James chapter 1, in verse 2, he says this, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know that testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing." There seems to be some kind of tie into the fact that if we don't suffer, we will never become patient. And if we never become patient, we will never be full and complete. Full and complete, that word in the Bible is saved. Salvation, saved, sozo. Full and complete, made whole. We will always be incomplete as long as we avoid suffering, never become patient, which will never produce character, which will never make us full and complete and whole. And for most of us, and myself included, I think one of the biggest problems we have in life is that we don't ever learn patience. I've been in this place I'm at for a long time. Maybe like 4 or 5 years. Well, it's a long time for me. It's an eternity. Because like 4 or 5 minutes, that's more like it. 4 or 5 days, you're pushing it. 4 or 5 months, I'm not dealing with it. In 4 or 5 years, man, it's just too long. And it gets to the point of where you lose that sight, that you lose yourself, you lose your... I need you to understand how I'll say this, but you lose your salvation. You lose your wholeness. You lose that sense of immortality, of eternity, that sense of living above what's natural. And until you've been there, man, you can't know what I'm talking about, but some of you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. Like you had that high, you had that place, you know God, you know His kingdom, you've experienced it all, but man, then the chicken started pecking at you. You ever been pecked to death by a chicken? Obviously, nobody has in here, because you'd be dead. But I can't imagine being pecked to death by a chicken. I mean, think of the imagery of that. Think how long that take. It's like marriage. Dude, you're done, man. I don't even know if you can recover from that. Grace will only carry you so far. Sometimes you just got to gain control before it comes out. Pecked to death by a chicken. And that's what's been happening, though. It's this little things, one after another, after another, after another, after another, then a big thing, then a little thing, little thing, little thing, little thing, big thing, little thing. And it's just like goes on and on and on and on and on. And here's my problem, and probably most of yours, is I'm not dealing with it. I'm not letting it produce patience. Actually, if you ask my family, it's kind of going the opposite direction. Like, the stronger it gets and the longer it goes, the more impatient. I used to have the patience of Job. Nothing could take me down, man. I was chilled. Like I was Mr. Upbeat, positive. Nothing can ever get me down. You guys all got problems, not me. I'll help you out. I'll share some of my positivity on you. But I'm telling you, man, after time, it just starts killing you. It just eats at you and eats at you and eats at you, and you get less and less patient. And here's what I'm figuring out. My wife, she's like, oh, thank God, finally. Here's what I'm figuring out. That I'm not learning what God's teaching. I'm fighting it. I'm fighting the very thing that can save me. I'm working against God. Because I want it all and I want it now. Right? Patience, see, I don't understand. Patience, by the very definition, takes time. Which stinks. That's just stupid. Right? What a dumb word. What a dumb thing, patience. Patience takes time to develop. And it can only be developed in tests and trials and troubles and tribulations. How you like all them T words? Tests and trials and troubles and tribulations, they produce in me patience. And patience, when it's fully grown, develops character. Now, I want character. I want to be someone I want to be someone who people look at and go, man, that dude he's a man of character. But I don't want to go through the patient route. Like, I like to skip that part. I like the character part, and I like the kingdom of heaven part, and I like the life part, man. I like all of that stuff. Like, I'm for that, right? And we're all for that, man. Let's get it, yeah. But there's only one path in the Bible. Would we say Jesus had character? I would say that he had character, right? And to me, his character developed probably the greatest result ever. He made all of us and all of humanity right with God. But what was the cost? How do you get there? With suffering, right? And so Paul talks a lot about sharing in the suffering of Christ. Sharing in the suffering of Messiah. And how do we share in the suffering of Messiah? And that's where you get to that place of like, well, if I really want to be saved, then I just got to suffer, so I'm suffering for the gospel. That's not the kind of suffering. Like, if you choose suffering, you're just weird. I mean, you're insane. You need to be locked up somewhere. Like, don't just go, man, I'm going to go get me some suffering. And you go like, I'm going to go make me some mistakes because I heard this said, I'm working on my testimony. Don't work on your testimony. Let it come to you. Right? You don't have to aggressively pursue suffering. If you don't have enough and you feel like you need to work on that character, come hang out. We got enough to go around here. Like, just grab hold of somebody, man. They'll share all you can ever want. Suffering is not something that we choose. It's something that happens to us. It's an outside force that affects who we really are. And so as we experience this, we have to recognize it. And that's why, like, in the book of James, the next verse is like, if any of you need wisdom, let him ask for it. And so we hear these messages on wisdom, and so we divide James into these little cool messages, these sermons that just fit in these little boxes, and we forget that this is all one thing. He didn't just go, well, now I think I'm going to write about wisdom. I was writing about suffering and patience, now I'm going to write about wisdom. No, what he was saying was, his very next sentence was, if any of you needs wisdom, ask for it. What is wisdom? Rick Warren said this. He said, wisdom is learning from other people's mistakes. Right. It's good to learn from your mistakes, but it's better to learn from other people's mistakes. Wisdom to me, is being able to see fully. It's like living with your eyes open. Instead of just bam, wow, that hurt. You know, like, it's like walking around in light. And so the way I've been is suffering with my head down, wondering what is happening. Instead of asking God for wisdom so I can see. And when I see the suffering for what it is, then I know how to rightly handle the suffering. And rightly handling the suffering produces patience. And patience, when it's fully developed, produces character. And character gives me life. It makes me whole or complete. Character is my salvation. It's me growing up and growing into the person I was created to be. But I can't get there without going through the suffering and recognizing what's happening and rightly handling that. And like, we know this. Everything I'm telling you, it's not a secret. This isn't something like, you're like, woo, that's amazing. That's it's not revelation. We know this. We raise kids and we see how stupid they are. No offense. We see them make mistakes and we see them do dumb things and we see them, we're like, that's going to hurt. That's going to produce suffering. Right? We see that, we're like, we look at them, you're going to suffer. You're going to suffer. And then they go through it and then they come back later and they're like, whoa, wait, I'm not doing that again. That was painful. And we're like, you're growing up. You're growing up. So we see our kids suffer and overcome and suffer and overcome and suffer and overcome, and we say they are growing up. And our hope is that they will be grown someday. Right? I'm 46 and my mom's like, someday. Someday. But we know that's true, right? I mean, you're laughing because you know it's true. So we know that suffering produces character, and character, when it's fully developed, makes you whole and complete and grown. Like if my kids never suffer, never have to deal with anything, if they deal with affluenza, if they go through things like that, then will they ever be grown? Will they ever be able to be on their own? Will they ever be able to live and function in life? I mean, we think if we could protect our kids and keep them safe and never have them suffer or experience anything, we're helping them. But we've seen how that works out, haven't we? Not very good, is it? But when we suffer and we respond rightly, we grow and we develop character and patience. And it takes time. Patience takes time. And so, as we walk through this and we see this in our kids, man, we know we can say, wow, the Bible's true. Like, I don't know if I'm buying in the Christian thing or I don't know about all that, but I do know that what he's saying is true. And if we know that's true, then can't we start to deal with our problems, with our pains, with our hurts, with our past, with the things that are really bugging us and the things that are messing with us? And when we start to deal rightly with those things, doesn't it give us life? Doesn't it start to produce in us character and strength and endurance? And as we begin to get stronger and we begin to live, then we begin to be able to stand on our own, and not just stand on our own, but we begin to share and spread the kingdom of heaven, and we become stronger. We become, instead of a drain on the people around us, we start to be a productive part of the kingdom of heaven, and it starts to spread and it starts to move. And we would say that's a good thing, right? And so as we grow and as we become and as we develop, it's good for our world, and the world starts to change. And then we live in a different world, and a different culture, and a different society, all because at some point I decided instead of just getting ticked off and angry and bitter and more enraged about my circumstance or my situation, I began to deal rightly with it. I began to be patient. And as I began to be patient, then I began to grow, and I began to be stronger, and I began to overcome all of these things in my life. And it becomes good for all of us. I know my family will be much happier. I know your family will be much happier. I know your friends will be much happier. You know, it's always weird being around somebody who's just on the edge of tripping out. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's always a struggle because you never know. Like, you're always walking on the eggshell. It's not fun. It's not comfortable, right? But how good is it to be around people who are patient? How good is it to ride with someone who's not yelling and screaming and threatening to kill people? It's a more enjoyable trip. And see, I'm like that even if I'm not driving, it's even worse. Because then I'm angry at the driver of all the cars. See, we got problems. I do. I'm lumping y'all in with mine. But like, we all have problems, right? I know I got some problems I got to work through, but I think I have hope. I think I have hope because I understand That suffering is not something that God does because he's angry at me or hates me, but maybe just the opposite. Maybe he's working something out. He's developing something in me that I need. How long can you fight me? I think that's what he's saying to me. How long you want to do this? Let's dance. How long you want to dance? Like God talks to me weird. He uses gangster voices. I don't know how he talks to you, the way he talks to me. Let's dance. Man, I want it. I want peace in my life. And I think we all do, and I think we can get there. I think we just have to. I think James's greatest advice follows up. Ask God for wisdom. Ask God to open your eyes where you can see the things that are coming and see what you're tripping on and see what's affecting you. I think when we do that, it changes us all. You guys stand up with me. I want to pray for you.